So I'm doing this video in order for us to be able to focus on Odysseus and his many adventures trying to get home after the Trojan War. So we can focus on that in class on Friday. So we're going to be starting the saga of the Nostoi, or the returns of the heroes, by, in video, going over some of the other heroes and their various returns to Greece and what happens to them after the Trojan War. So we'll start with Agamemnon, but in order to start with him, we have to understand the whole saga of the house of Atreus. We can't actually start with Atreus himself. Okay, so let's get the backstory of how this whole family is cursed. So first of all, we start with Pelops. Pelops was the son of Tantalus. Tantalus, if you remember, kills his son and tries to serve him to the gods for dinner in order to test their omniscience. And of course, they catch him. He winds up in Tartarus, where he can't eat or drink. He reaches for fruit. It's always just out of his reach. He reaches for water. It recedes, so he can't get any. But they also restored Pelops to life. Remember, he has like a ivory shoulder bone or something like that because Demeter gnawed on him a little bit, but that's the only part of him that wasn't him. So he is restored to life. He grows up and he falls in love with this woman named Hippodamia. Now, Hippodamia is a princess. Her father is King Oenomaus. Right here, this is that guy. And King Oenomaus is a son of Ares. And as a son of Ares, he has been gifted with these very, very swift horses that he uses in chariot races. Okay, so Oenomaus is a son of Ares, and Ares gave his son a gift of very swift horses. Now, an oracle has told Oenomaus that he will die whenever his daughter Hippodamia marries. So he makes it very difficult for her suitors. Anyone who wants to pursue Hippodamia must beat Oenomaus in a chariot race first. Now, he does have these horses from Ares, so he tries to make things a little more fair because he does give the suitor a head start. But if Oenomaus catches up with him, he will kill him and decorate his palace roof with his head. So he has a collection of heads on his palace roof. Now, Hippodamia would like to marry Pelops, actually, so she enlists the help of a servant. Oops, what happened? Sorry. A servant named Myrtilus. She convinces Myrtilus to take out the hitch pin of of her father's chariot, and ensuring that his chariot would crash and Pelops would win. Myrtilus, though, is not satisfied with just the princess's thanks. He actually tries to rape her, so Pelops throws him off of a cliff into the sea. As Myrtilus is falling to his death, he curses Pelops and all of his descendants. Okay, that leads us to their descendants, their sons, Thyestes and Atreus. Right? So, these two sons quarrel over who will become the next king of Mycenae, because the next king is said to be a son of Pelops, and that's it. So it could be either one of them. So Atreus owns a golden fleeced lamb. Not a lamb, it's a ram, R-A-M. And stick with me, folks. This might be a little rough here tonight because I'm tired. Anyway, Atreus owns a golden fleeced ram, and because of this, he claims the throne. But Thyestes seduces Atreus's wife, and so she gives this golden fleeced ram to Thyestes so he could be king. Now, Atreus is kicked out and goes into exile. And when Atreus returns, he drives out Thyestes. Right? So Atreus is now king, and Thyestes is in exile. But later, Atreus will trick Thyestes into returning by pretending that he wants to reconcile with him and inviting him to a banquet. The nasty part of this is that Atreus kills Thyestes' sons and serves them to their father, and he does eat them. The only child of Thyestes to survive is his infant son Odysseus. Thyestes curses Atreus for obviously the crime of killing his children. But Atreus' son, Agamemnon, will become king. Right? So Agamemnon, this is where he comes in. Don't forget about Odysseus, though, because we're not done with him yet either. Okay. So, if you remember from when we began the Trojan War, when the Greeks go to set off to war, they have difficulties. The seas keep them from, a storm at sea or winds at sea keeps them from leaving the port, and they find out that the only way that they will be able to leave is if Agamemnon sacrifices one of his children, and his daughter Iphigenia is the one that is sacrificed. Now, also keep in mind that there is an alternative version of the story where she's saved, but we'll get to that in a bit. Okay, so with Agamemnon's sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia, Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, is angry and wants to avenge her daughter's murder. So she winds up taking Odysseus as her lover. And she and Odysseus rule Mycenae in the 10-year absence of Agamemnon while he's in Troy. So we'll get back to that here in a bit. So, there is a quarrel amongst the Greeks before they even leave Troy, and one of the problems of them leaving deals with Ajax, or Aias the Locrian, or Ajax the Lesser. Now, if you remember, what he did is he drug Cassandra out of the temple of Athena and rapes her, and that greatly angers Athena, so she raises a storm to keep the Greeks from being able to leave Troy. So we learned about the price that Aias the Locrian's family has to pay in terms of sending attendants to Athena's temple for thousands of years. We learned about that last time. So they're finally able to leave, and when they get home and Agamemnon arrives back in Mycenae, Clytemnestra and Odysseus have been having an affair for 10 years and have been ruling Mycenae together. And so when Agamemnon comes home, they murder him. Now, Cassandra was taken from Troy as Agamemnon's concubine, so she is also murdered with him. But remember, she has the gift of prophecy, but has been cursed because no one believes her. So she describes what's going to happen in the palace when they arrive, but again, of course, no one believes her. This will lead to more drama, as we'll see. Okay, so Clytemnestra and her lover Odysseus kill Agamemnon when he returns to Greece. Orestes, this is known as the Orestian saga. Orestes is a son of Agamemnon, and he is away from Mycenae when his father was murdered. Apollo orders Orestes to fulfill his filial duty to his father and avenge his death by killing his mother. Orestes returns to Mycenae in disguise, but he is recognized by his sister Electra. And Electra will end up helping Orestes to kill both Clytemnestra, their mother, and Odysseus, Clytemnestra's lover. Now there are two kind of approaches to this particular saga. The Homeric version of the saga praises Orestes for avenging his father's death, showing that he is a dutiful son. The version we're going to look at a little more closely is the Aeschylean version, which has a great deal of conflict because, yes, he avenges his father, but he's also killed his mother. And blood guilt of a family member is a very serious offense, if you remember. So, in Aeschylus's version, Orestes is pursued by the Furies, or the Erinyes, as punishment for murdering his mother, even though Apollo commanded him to do it. Right? And remember, the Furies are these torch-bearing women with like snakes wrapped around them and whips and all this kind of stuff. And again, they torture especially people who are guilty of having the blood of a relative on their hands. So, a trial is held to determine Orestes' guilt or innocence. This trial is held at Athens, where he's tried before the court at the Areopagus, where Athena presides over the court, the Erinyes, or the Furies, prosecute him, and Apollo defends him. The verdict is delivered by a jury of Athenian citizens, and it was equally split down the middle. So Athena's verdict is what finally carries the day, and she votes for acquittal. And the way this is explained in this play is that the killing of the mother does not outweigh her murder of her husband, and a son must be more loyal to the father than to the mother. Anyway, that's the result of the story. But there's more. In Euripides' version of the story, Iphigenia was not actually sacrificed, but was saved by Artemis and taken to Tauri. So Apollo tells Orestes to go to the land of Tauri, in what is today southern Russia, and fetch a wooden statue of Artemis from a temple. And it just so happens, well, not coincidentally, obviously, but that is the temple where Iphigenia is a priestess to the goddess Artemis, because she was taken there instead of sacrificed. When Orestes arrives, she, Iphigenia, saves her brother from being sacrificed to Artemis, and together they return with that statue, and Iphigenia becomes a priestess of Artemis in Mycenae. All right. Now, here we go, some more. Orestes loves Hermione. This is her name here. And Hermione is a daughter of Menelaus and Helen. Menelaus is the king of Sparta. Helen is the woman who started the whole Trojan War, right? The face that launched 1,000 ships. And Orestes wants to marry Helen, but the problem is that Neoptolemus is also in the picture. Now, Hermione was first betrothed to Orestes, but during the war, she became betrothed to Neoptolemus. So she winds up marrying Neoptolemus, but Neoptolemus, I'm sorry, I forgot to remind you, he's Achilles' son, the one that was fetched at the end of the war in order to end it, because it was prophesied that he was one of them they needed to have present for the war to end. Okay, forgot about that little detail. Sorry about that. Anyway, she marries Neoptolemus, but at the end of the war, Neoptolemus takes Andromache, Hector, the Trojan hero's widow. He takes her as his concubine because Hermione cannot get pregnant. So this creates a rift between Neoptolemus and Hermione to begin with. And so Orestes steps in, kills Neoptolemus, and gets Hermione back. And that's the end of the story, because Orestes gets his happy ending after all of his drama. So, that was the Greek return, the king of the Greeks. Now the king of Sparta, Menelaus, has a much easier time returning to Sparta. They also are involved in this quarrel leaving Troy, and they wind up in the midst of a storm also raised by Athena, and they are stranded on Pharos, which is near Egypt. So, in order to figure out how to appease the gods, Eidothea shows up and says that they need to ask her father Proteus, the old man of the sea, to tell them how to get home. So this is the story where Menelaus waits until Proteus has gone to sleep among his herd of seals, and then grabs him tightly and holds on while Proteus shapeshifts into many different creatures and shapes in order to try to escape. When Menelaus perseveres, Proteus finally agrees to answer Menelaus's questions truthfully. He describes the sacrifices necessary to appease the gods and gain safe passage across the sea, as well as revealing that the gods will transport Menelaus and Helen to Elysium at the end of their mortal lives. And one of the reasons why is because, if you remember, Helen, in many of these versions of the myth, was a daughter of Zeus. So they return to Sparta, they rule together, live happily ever after, and then live happily ever after in eternity in Elysium. I don't know, doesn't seem fair, maybe. Anyway, the last set of heroes is, first of all, Nestor returns to Pylos. There's nothing much to talk about there. But Diomedes, Idomeneus, and Philoctetes. Philoctetes is the guy with the wound on his foot from the snake bite that doesn't heal, and it smells bad. So I always remember him by Philoctetes with the smelly feeties. You're welcome for that. Anyway, they all three will actually wind up in Italy instead of Greece. Okay, so Idomeneus, to start with here, Idomeneus. After the war, his ship hits a terrible storm, and he promises Poseidon that he would sacrifice the first living thing he saw when he returned home if Poseidon would just save his ship and crew. And so they do end up successfully coming out of the storm, but when he returns home, the first living thing he sees is his son. So Idomeneus duly sacrifices his son, because that's what he's promised Poseidon, but the gods are angry at Idomeneus because he murdered his own son, and so they send a plague to Crete. So, in order to get rid of a plague, you gotta send away the person who's responsible. So they exile Idomeneus, and he winds up in Italy. Philoctetes also winds up in Italy, and he starts a cult of Apollo, but he will later die in battle with southern Italians. Diomedes, on the other hand, will end up again in Italy, and he founds 10 cities around the Adriatic Sea. The significance of all three is that they are revered as heroes, but after their death they become gods, especially in the Roman pantheon. And what's interesting about this is this does connect the historical facts of colonization, the colonization of southern Italy, back to the Greek and Roman myth, or Greek mythological origins that they shared. Right? So colonization of southern Italy and these heroes that are exiled from Greece after the war with Troy. And remember that our Trojan survivors are going to wind up in Italy and found Rome. So without the Trojan War and the heroes, we wouldn't have Italy, I guess. So that leads us now to the saga of Odysseus. So we will pick up with this in class tomorrow. Well, Friday.